Welcome back to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. America delivers harsher punishments than almost any other country. The numbers in our criminal justice system tell the story. The U.S. has the sixth highest incarceration rate in the world. It's surpassed by only a few countries that include El Salvador and Cuba. 2 million people are now sitting in some kind of cell in our country. That's in part because of our homicide rate. But U.S. states are generally more punishing than Latin American nations, which have higher homicide rates than us. That can be seen in our prison sentences, which are, on average, longer in comparison to other countries. But part of Michigan's legal system is trying to change that. 2 weeks ago, in a 5-2 decision, the Michigan Supreme Court banned mandatory life sentences for 19 and 20-year-olds convicted of murder. What might be the consequences of this decision, and what would it take to incarcerate less Americans without threatening people's safety? To discuss this, we have Rick Speck here. He's the leadership programs coordinator for JustLeadershipUSA. That's an organization advocating for criminal justice reform from people who've been directly impacted by the criminal justice system. Rick, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Rick, you work to reform the criminal justice system. What was your immediate reaction to the Michigan Supreme Court's decision banning mandatory life sentences for 19 and 20-year-olds who've been convicted of murder?
I was extremely pleased with the decision because what it does is it opens up the opportunity for, I believe, about 580 individuals in the state of Michigan to be seen and to be heard, many who haven't been seen or heard for decades.
580 people. So they will now be eligible to return to local courts to ask for a shorter sentence. What do you think will be the consequences of this decision? Will a lot more people return home?
Well, I think it's important to remember that this is based on merit. So to your point, they'll go in front of a judge, and based on what their institutional history looks like, whether they've been incarcerated for 10, 15, 20 years, they're going to look at that and say, does this person warrant a second look? Does this person warrant a number of years versus life without the possibility of parole for a population of people who are just leaping into adulthood? Right. And so the science proves out that while by age 19 and 20 you're an adult, the science proves out that you haven't fully formed your brain. Right. And so your cognitive decision making, all those things haven't been fully formed. So what it means is young people, because they're still young, are going to have a chance to be redeemable. Right. We just had Resurrection Sunday, everybody that celebrated that. But it's also a redemption. Right. We look at Resurrection Sunday as also Redemption Sunday. Well, this is also a form of redemption. And so folks will get to be judged on the merit of the life that they've lived up until they see that judge.
So what you're saying, it's not guaranteed for anyone, but it is getting folks a chance to have their cases reviewed. And because of the science that says oftentimes, when people have committed these crimes, they were not fully developed in their brain. They were not maybe thinking in their right minds or in the minds of an adult.
No, absolutely. And when we all think back to when we were 19 and 20, how many decisions did we make that we wish we could take back?
Yeah.
Right. and
a lot.
And of course, this is obviously a more drastic decision, but I think sometimes folks don't understand the long-term implication of whatever those actions are. And so for me, somebody that is formally incarcerated, that served about 18 and a half years of his adult life inside these, I've gotten to know these people pretty well. I have a lot of great friends that are out here, as well as many still inside, that I wouldn't be afraid to have as my neighbor, that I would welcome as my neighbor.
I want to stay on that notion for a little bit. The fact that you spent multiple stints in prison, the last time for a violent crime. You know, I think some people believe that if someone has done something really bad, they're unable to change. What was changing like for you? What did you do, and how did others help you to change your life?
Well, for me as a father, when I was incarcerated the last time for 15 years, I left a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old girl. And so for me, part of wanting to change and be better and do better was because I wanted to be a father one day. I wanted that privilege back. And so for a lot of years, it was something as simple as reading the Bible, doing some correspondence courses, trying to keep my mind busy and on positive things. But later on, probably after I was in about 10, 11 years, there was a nonprofit group that really poured into me in leadership development, helped me to resolve conflict peacefully, gave me the skills and tools to really look inside myself and say, what do I want for me? I did have an out date. I was not serving life. And it just opened up a world of possibilities. And we began to teach this program to general population, and it lit a fire and a passion in me to help my fellow man that continued when I came home. But it was that pouring in, right? And realizing I was worthy. I forgave myself for the things that I've done. I also forgave people that harmed me, which hurt people. I think we may have heard that plenty of times, especially in criminal justice. And it wasn't about forgiving them for them. It was about forgiving them for me so that I could move forward in a meaningful way with my own life and not hold on to this anger and animosity, and just heal. I think that's one thing we don't pay a lot of attention to is how we heal. And prison isn't really a healing space by and large, but I honestly believe that that's changing because the men and women that are incarcerated are changing. And there are folks that came out before me, folks that came out after me that are making this change and really are a beacon of light for other folks to say, wow, they started this business. They started this nonprofit. I can do those things too.
You're saying that it was in prison while being part of conflict resolution program that you started to see your own worth. Had no one told you that before entering prison, that you had value?
I think based on a lot of decisions I made, what I was told is you're going to end up in prison. You're going to end up this. You're going to, right? None of it was on a positive note, a lot of negative connotation. And that was based, again, on limited resources and understanding for my own family, my own community. And so consequently, that was a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so I continued to go in and out of prison for most of my adult life. But what started it was just a drunken night and a blackout, broke into some businesses, don't remember to this day even doing it, still paid the consequences for that. But that really changed my whole trajectory of my life, and it just led to more and more poor decisions, which unfortunately kept reincarcerating me.
Well, let's think about that, those poor decisions that have led other folks to be incarcerated, and let's think about it as it applies to this Michigan Supreme Court case, which means that anguished friends and relatives of murder victims will have to revisit cases. Now, I realize you lost your daughter to gun violence, which I'm very sorry to hear. So you've been on both sides of the criminal justice system. What would you say to people who are angry about the Supreme Court's decision? And again, that decision bans mandatory life sentences for 19 and 20-year-olds who've been convicted of murder.
Well, I can say this. When this tragedy hit me, I was just because I was incarcerated didn't mean I hurt less, didn't mean my family didn't hurt less. And I was angry. And if you would have asked me in those first few months what I wanted for the person, I would have said I wanted life without parole. I mean, if we're just being honest, I wanted retribution. I wanted the worst to happen to this person because I felt like the worst was happening to my family. I also contemplated taking justice into my own hands and what that looked like. And to be honest, it was men that were formerly incarcerated, that had taken a life, had been convicted of homicide, that didn't leave my side for weeks, literally months. And they told me, Rick, I promise you, this is not what you want. This is not going to make you feel better. This is not going to ease your pain. This is not the answer. And so to me, there's a bit of irony there that these same folks that took a life, some of them, served well over 20 years, second degree, first degree, had an opportunity to come home. And it was that community that reached out to me to say, this isn't what you want to do. I promise you. And we had conversations, and I cried and I screamed and I was angry. And it was those people coming to me, loving on me, never leaving my side, that allowed me to kind of process and work through this and understand, A, that's not what I want. I don't want to give my life up as well. B, I see the good that folks that took a life that served 20 years or better and were given a second chance, how they're contributing to our communities that we live in all throughout this state, all throughout this country for that matter. And I understand that we're a better place because of these folks coming home, because they're credible messengers. They're eager to work with youth. They don't want to see young people make the same choices and mistakes they did. They're eager to also help, after years of being home, to help other folks come home, because I think that's just as important. I work with some groups that do direct service work, and I often wonder, wow, what would it have been like for me if I would have came home the first or the second time, for that matter, let alone the third, to have a group there to help me navigate, because you really feel like an alien. Everything was different. Imagine you come home 15 years later, there's smartphones, nobody's using cash, everybody's using a card. You're lost.
Time was frozen for you.
Yeah, I say we live in like a time warp when you're incarcerated, from clothes to language. I train a lot on person first language. I never knew what person first language was. I never knew what it meant to focus or center somebody's humanity over their worst decision they made. So yeah, for me, it's still very hard to process. The person that took my daughter's life ultimately was found not guilty, but found guilty of some gun charges. So I'm also faced with that individual being released into the community in less than 30 days.
How does that make you feel?
Angry, for sure. Scared at the same time. 6 years isn't a lot of time to change. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I don't know if it's been done. I don't know where this person is today, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, because those things all lead to poor decisions. When you're bankrupt in those different departments, you tend to make really poor decisions. So what I do know is, for men and women that are coming home that are going to be affected, the 580 plus people that will be affected by this decision, there is celebration for their families. There should be. I think some folks, for the survivors of their victims, I think many times folks want to make amends. I think a lot of men and women, once they gain their freedom, are out here doing things to honor the person whose life they've taken. I know many men and women that fast during that time, that do something to recognize what they've done. And a lot of them, that's their motivation for doing better and being better, because they understood what they did, the gravity of what they did. They took a life. And so, at least in my experience, and I've been doing this work, May will be 11 years that I've been released, and I probably started doing this work 3 months after I was out. And so by and large, as somebody that still has children and grandchildren in this community, I don't fear for this decision because I know the men and women that are going to be coming home based on this decision. They still have to, A, get in front of a judge, show that they've earned this, and then B, they have to go in front of the parole board and, again, face a tremendous amount of scrutiny, not only for their action, but their actions while they've been incarcerated. You have to answer for that as well. And then the parole board can decide to grant you a 2-year, 5-year parole, or they can give you a continuance, 2 years, 5 years, and you'll have to come back and show that you're redeemable again. So again, it's not a get out of jail free card. For folks, for families that are facing this, the only words I can offer are many of these folks are not those people anymore, just like we weren't.
This is the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking about the Michigan Supreme Court's recent decision to ban mandatory life sentences for 19 and 20-year-olds in murder cases. Our guest is Rick Speck. He spent time in prison and is working to reform the criminal justice system with JustLeadershipUSA. And we want to hear from you. Do you know people who've been impacted by our criminal justice system? Did they receive the support and accountability needed to change their behavior? The number is 313-577-1019. We have Harold in Detroit on the phones now. Harold, thank you for calling the Metro. I understand you helped someone through the criminal justice system. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, I did. It's probably like 15 years ago. She got out of prison. She paroled to me, and then she had to go complete like 2 classes, like 2 different classes. She completed that. And then she had like a part-time job for like 4 hours or something like that. But on her part-time job for 4 hours, she was getting like, like physically like ungrabbed, touching, feeling, all types of stuff. But she never told me, never told the parole officer, never told the supervisor, and never told the police, because the thing was who's going to believe a convicted felon.
Sure.
And then, like, she has to do drug tests in the city of Detroit. And it was like they're on Grand River and Warren. So that's like, you go to the drug test. But on weekends, you have to get another drug test. And they call, like, if your number, like, is red, green, or whatever. But the catch, this drug test, it's not in Detroit. It's like going towards Pontiac, like 23, way out towards Pontiac and Auburn Hill. But when your color's called, you get so many hours to get there. If you don't get there, it's completed as a positive drug test. So I had to give her. I said, well, how much is it? It's $50. Well, I need another $50. What do you need the other $50 for? I got to get a ride. So a person may charge them $15 to $50 to get to the drug test outside of the city of Detroit. So you had to deal with that. And then when she got out of prison, she didn't know how to ride the bus, which means she didn't know the difference between smart, DOT, and then like in the wintertime, she may get the bus right there on Warren, right in the New Center area, like she's going to get the bus downtown, get to Grand River. Then you got people messing with the bus stop, but the Wayne State Police rolled up on them and, got rid of the people mess with, because she used to go to the same bus stop every day.
Harold, thank you. You are, I think, really painting a picture here for folks of the many, many barriers that people face when they return home from prison, that it's a lot of stuff that many of us are not even thinking about. Thank you so much for describing those experiences and for the support that you offered that person, which I'm sure was very impactful. Rick, I want to talk a little bit more about that, about the barriers that people face when they return home from prison that we're not thinking about. I mean, Harold just described the cascading effects from transportation to getting that drug test. Can you talk about the difficulties that formerly incarcerated people experience when they return home?
Well, I know the Department of Corrections doing a much better job today as far as IDs, but for example, 11 years ago when I came home, I didn't have a birth certificate, and I didn't have a Social Security card. didn't have ID to get those things. Luckily, my mother was still alive at that point. She was in a wheelchair, had to go downtown, Herman Kiefer, get my birth certificate, 4 trips to Social Security to try and get a card. The only ID I had was this red plastic ID that said parolee on it. And that was pretty embarrassing to pull out, right?
Sure, yeah.
But a lot of times, not just for folks like me, but even when we take into consideration these juvenile lifers that are going to be coming home, many of them never rode a bus. Many of them never had full-time employment. They were young, 18, 19, 20 years old, never paid bills, never lived on their own. And all of a sudden you come home and it's like, okay, now navigate the world after never navigating it. I've had many instances where some folks never even had a license yet. And so now you look at these folks, though, they're 40, 50 years old, late 30s. And so by all means, when you look at them, they look like this normal adult, should be able to handle all the basic things. But the reality is they're 18, 19, 20 years old emotionally. The knowledge that they have of the world is not what it is today. And so coming home again, it's like a foreigner in a foreign land. And you're extremely nervous. You're afraid that if you do misstep, you're going to be returned. So the organization I work with a lot doing some consulting, I used to be a former board member, is a group called Nation Outside, which is local right here in Michigan. And they do peer-led reentry, trauma-informed peer-led reentry. And those folks are people that have already came home, been successful, went to school, gainful employment, got their license, and now they're working as mentors and navigators for other folks coming home to take that same journey with them, to understand those barriers to ID, to understand housing barriers, what that looks like. Even for me, I faced many of these barriers. I couldn't get gainful employment that paid me a livable wage.
Sure.
So yeah, it was just extremely, extremely difficult.
So what you think is really effective is for returning citizens to have an advocate, per se, who can help them to navigate life, to navigate all the changes that they missed out on. And it's like you could read hundreds of books while you're incarcerated, but nothing could prepare you for that life experience of being back out in the world. But what do you say to someone who doesn't think we should be spending more money on a person who's maybe done great harm to another?
Well, if it's just a financial argument, per se, if we take the emotion out and we want to look at it from a finance side, when we look at what it costs to incarcerate a person every year, we're looking at probably $40,000, $50,000 per person, right? We give them services when they come home to help them acclimate, to get them back on their feet, to get them, in a trade, reintegrated into a career. Maybe they have some certifications from inside. How much money's really spent there, right? A few $1,000s. And now we're putting this person on a pathway to being a returning neighbor, to being a citizen, to engaging the community, to being a voter. I often laugh because those are the folks that look around the neighborhood and know what's happening before everybody else, because folks inside, you live on a heightened state of awareness 24/7 because your life depends on it, literally. Those folks that are in the community, they want people to be safe. They want to be safe, and they want other folks safe. And they're looking for an opportunity to redeem. This is America. We love second chance, right? We love the underdog. These are underdogs. These are folks that need a second chance. For somebody like me, I needed 3 and 4 chances before I got it right. So let's not just limit it to second chances, because second chances don't always cut it. And for this particular population, though, what I understand for folks that have taken a life, the rate of recidivism for that population is less than 1%.
Wow.
Less than 1%.
That is a compelling data point. In the last 30 seconds that we have here, Rick, do you think that as it exists, there's substance to jail and prison? Should we just cut down the amount of time people spend behind bars, or do we need to rethink the entire thing?
I think it's about resources and what we give folks besides time to serve. What they're doing while they're serving that time, that's where we need to be reallocating our resources. You know, real quick, National Lifers of America, when this legislation was coming down, they all looked at it too and said, and these are folks that all pretty much committed a homicide. And they said, what is fair? And even from those folks, they said 20 years, right? You would think, oh, they might say 10 or 15, right? No, they said 20 years. It takes 20 years to fully process this, to fully pay your debt back. But at some point, they want to be made whole too. And so after 20 years, yes, folks should have the opportunity to be made whole.
Rick Speck is Leadership Programs Coordinator for Just Leadership USA. He's reforming the state's criminal justice system, and he advocated for the recent 5-2 decision made by the state Supreme Court to ban automatic life sentences for 19 and 20-year-olds who committed murder. Rick, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you.
Coming up, it's Earth Day, which we've been talking about throughout the show. We'll learn about how the city of Detroit is working to green the city and prevent flooding. This is the Metro on WDET. Stay with us.